Was Tuesday's confession, which comes from Chaz. Thanks, Chaz. Father Simon and the Drive Time Collective. I seek forgiveness for an episode that occurred in the mid-90s at a university on the M4 corridor, somewhere between Slough and Swindon. Narrows it down, not much. At that time, I was studying for a PhD in zoology. I'd recently finished my undergraduate degree at the same university. The undergrad zoology bunch were a geeky lot, and many had exotic pets to keep them company in their various digs and halls of residence. You can imagine how cleaning ladies, and in those days they were all ladies, reacted when confronted with a variety of lizards, snakes, amphibians, and invertebrates. As a mature student with my own flat, I was often called upon to rehome various waifs and strays that were no longer welcome in their previous homes. Strangely, when my fellow graduates departed for pastures new, I found myself still in possession of some of their more unusual pets. One such orphan was Alice, the chili rose tarantula, who, for various reasons, I'd housed in a temperature-controlled room at the top of the Animal and Microbial Science Tower. This was directly above the lab next door to mine, and this was the abode of Dr. Stripes, my flatmate. Tanya was an extremely sweet-natured and somewhat gullible researcher, and Paula, who was a bit of a card and often played numerous japes on her colleagues. She was, unusually for a biologist, somewhat arachnophobic. I'd never really considered playing any pranks on Paula, as she was really quite astute and I have absolutely no poker face. But one Easter, I'd only been in the lab briefly to look after my hoverfly larvae, as you do, and I hadn't seen anyone until the Tuesday morning after the bank holiday. The first person I bumped into was Tanya, gullible Tanya, who, kind-hearted soul that she was, immediately inquired after my long weekend. For reasons that I'm still not clear about, I said, "Fine, except that Alice the tarantula escaped." Alice had actually moved back home to be with the rest of the menagerie, so she wasn't escaped at all. Tanya immediately ran to tell arachnophobic Paula the bad news, and because she believed it wholeheartedly, Paula was immediately taken in, especially when I showed her Alice's previously occupied vivarium, which was now empty. That night in the pub, Dr. Stripes and I discussed at length what we might capitalize on with Alice's newfound freedom. Being the zoology geek that I was and still am, I'd saved all of Alice's cast-off skins.
Oh, right. Of course you have.
As a record of how my girl was growing up so fast. A bit like marking your child's height on a wall or door frame.
Not much like that,
Is
really.
It was a simple matter of leaving these skins in dark corners awaiting discovery. After a few months, my fellow scientists came to realize there was nothing to be afraid of, as these static, in quotes, spiders were not Alice, but merely evidence of her growth rate. Paula had begun to take on a rather haunted look and inquired, "What do all these cast skins mean?" I replied, "Well, she's found a food source and she's clearly getting huge." We all bumped along quite happily for a few months. Alice continued to grow, and there was an occasional sighting. During this period, a team of painters and decorators turned up to freshen up the 7th floor. I got chatting to one chap who was extremely amiable and seemed like he might be up for a bit of a laugh. I briefed him on the ongoing situation and asked if he wouldn't mind spotting Alice, and he agreed. An hour or so later, from behind a very large freezer, a long tirade of cursing and expletives rang out. We all rushed out of our various labs to be confronted by a very irate painter. I quote, "You white-coated types need locking up. Who in their right mind lets blooming great spiders roam around the place? It was the size of a dinner plate. I don't get paid enough for this." It was a performance Sir Larry would have been proud of. If I hadn't known that Alice was safely contained, I might have believed him. Paula had gone a strange colour, but then we were just outside her office. And so we went on. Dr. Stripes and I had a few strategy meetings in the pub, and I'm sure Alice would have eventually grown to be the size of a cat. But then something catastrophic happened. Down on the ground floor was a technician's room full of wondrous pieces of kit where all our glassware got washed. In the pursuit of scientific breakthroughs, we used a lot of glassware, and it was therefore something of a shock when the glassware technicians announced they'd heard about the large spider on the loose, and they refused to come anywhere near the 7th floor. Well, there was only one thing for it. We staged the capture of Alice. Various people were auditioned, and it turned out that Val from down the corridor had the best scream. She discovered Alice happily munching on a cricket just outside the lifts, and I bravely captured her. Alice, who was actually large saucer-sized by now, took the whole thing in her stride and calmly carried on with lunch. A somewhat relieved Paula went off to phone her mum and explained that the nightmare was over. Most importantly, the glassware started to get clean again. Father Simon, I don't beg forgiveness from Paula. She'd have had it done to me. She once moved an entire office into a lift so that it greeted its occupant on the ground floor. I do have a beg forgiveness from Tanya, who was innocently duped. The lovely glassware technicians, who really did make life so much easier, whom I suspect thought we were all a bit odd. And finally, Alice herself, who really was a very delightful and well-behaved spider and didn't deserve the reputation she acquired. Because she never really escaped, even though she was my favourite tarantula. Words that have never been used in a confession before. We might get some other tarantula confessions, I don't know. Sister Jackie, what do you say with the voice of responsibility there?
Well, I may have been able to forgive the jolly jape. However, I cannot forgive the collecting of spider skins. It's all a bit Cannibal Lecter-ish for my liking.
Yes, it was the skins that I think might have freaked most people out, brother from another group.
It is a bit... It is a bit weird, isn't it? That was my voice. Very emotional about the cast-off skins. So yes, I was minded to not forgive. But then I remembered that really aren't all the spiders our friends? Circle of life. That's what I think we're all learning from that. Laughing and learning with the confession tonight. So for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
Laughing and learning.
Laughing and learning. It is my new thing.
Buzzword.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, laughing and learning.
Okay, it's a tarantula on the loose. Except not confession.